this week we are speaking with Cynthia Young. Right now, she is the Assistant Vice President at the University of Texas Southwest Medical Center, where she focuses on employee satisfaction, communications, and engagement. But she is a former employee of Southwest, where she was a Senior Director of Labor and Employee Relations, as well as communications. So Cynthia, thank you so much for taking time out your schedule to be with us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah. So Cynthia, as we always do, we always ask the guests to tell us a little bit about themselves. So tell us a little bit about your background.
So I have kind of a varied background. I taught marketing in public schools when I was directly out of college, and then I became an investigator for Child Protective Services. And
oh, wow.
I did that for only 3 years because it will break your heart. And my college roommate worked at Southwest Airlines, and we were on the phone one night, and I was telling her how sad my work was, and I think I was in tears. And she said, every time we talk, this is what you say. Why don't you stop that, and why don't you come to Southwest? She was a flight attendant. She said, apply to be a flight attendant. We'll fly together. It'll be fun. So I applied, and they didn't hire me. And I thought, what? You don't want me? Of course you want me. So I wrote a letter to the then chairman and president and CEO, Herb Kelleher, and I said, I think there's been a mistake. I'm pretty sure you want me. I just don't know in what capacity, but let's talk. And so I got this phone call from his office, and they said, no, we still don't want you as a flight attendant, but Herb thought your letter was hilarious and he wants you to be a writer. And so that's how I got to Southwest Airlines. But when I got there, I told him I really wasn't trying to be funny. I was serious. So in any event, that's how I started. I went into the executive office as a writer, and I did, letters from VIP customers and letters from all kinds of customers and issues with politicians and just things that came up. But my real interest was in how employees affected the business and how customer service, which was really what we sold, was affected by how people felt about their work. And so that's what attracted my interest to that part of the business. I took a detour between that and my HR career at Southwest. I went into the cargo business as a sales rep and ended up managing the western half of our freight system for several years. And then I heard about an opening in the people department, and it was for people relations. And I was aware of a leader at Southwest who was not a very good leader. And people who reported to that person had gone to the people department to say, here's what's going on. And because that person managed up really well, the employee was not really heard. And I saw this opening, and I thought, I want to be in that job. I want to make sure that anytime an employee comes forward with a story about a leader or a situation, that that the person in that role needs to make room for the possibility that they're telling the truth and take it seriously. And so I applied for it, and I got the job. And this is what's important about Southwest. We talked about a career lattice rather than ladder, because you could move from one area to another. Even if you wanted to step back to learn it, you could do that. There was no harm, no foul. If you wanted to take on more responsibility and they thought you had the firing synapses to do it, they would give you the chance. Now, if you didn't perform, you were held accountable. So, it was a risk sometimes, but so I took that job and I loved it. And I built my team out, and we did investigations into EEOC related claims and into other claims that in other companies wouldn't rise to the level of an investigation, just things that harmed the culture, but they certainly weren't illegal. They were just not congruent with our culture. So I did that work, and I managed the benefits service center, and I did a lot of other stuff in the people department while I was in that role, that director role. And then one day, Colleen Barrett called me, and Colleen Barrett is one of the unsung heroes at Southwest Airlines. She actually was Herb Kelleher's legal secretary when he was a lawyer. So when he and two others founded Southwest Airlines, of course, he took Colleen with him because they were like yin and yang. What he was good at, she was not, and vice versa. They had different skill sets, but she kept him out of the ditch a lot.
Yeah.
And she understood people as well as he did. And they both had, when that company was founded, it's not like somebody had to outline, this is who we want to be. That the company culture unfolded around who Colleen and Herb were.
So it was that whole dynamic.
Yes, and exactly. And who they were, and Colleen still is, are people of complete integrity and people who enjoy other people. And they expect the best out of people. And they created an environment where, this is what I think sometimes people don't get. They think of Southwest as one big party. But when you give people more in terms of respect and ability to show what you can do, potential, all of that, when you give them that, then you can expect more performance. And they did. And people always perform, not always, but most people performed at their very best because they had this compact with the company. I get more, you get more. You get discretionary effort that way. So
Cynthia, well, I guess back then it wasn't planned. I'm just trying to imagine, because today everything is a PowerPoint slide, a strategy session, right? A framework. It wasn't that way.
It wasn't that way. It was, this is how we operate. We tell the truth. We respect people. We expect a lot. They can expect a lot of us. That's just who they were as people. And then they hired people in leadership roles who thought the same way. And so that got replicated over and over down into the stations and out as we grew from 3 stations to, gosh, I don't even know how many now. But when I got there, we had just celebrated getting our 100th aircraft delivery. That was in 1989. And now, 600 or 1,000, I don't know how many airplanes, but that's been replicated over and over. And you don't get into a leadership role in general or keep a leadership role if you don't hold those same values. So anyway, so Colleen moved up through the ranks as Herb taught her new things. She learned new things. She taught him new things. And she was promoted to the role of president. And she called me one day when I was in the people department, and she said, that work that I've been doing all the time I've been here, where I send cards and notes to people and check on employees? I said, yes. She said, well, I don't have time to do that anymore because I'm the president and I've got other stuff to do. So I need somebody to actually build a department that will operationalize this and formalize it and do it. And I said, good, that sounds great. And I said, let me know how that goes. And she said, you're hilarious. You start on Monday. So, so I left the people department and went back to the executive office and created the internal customer care department. And that's where I really, really was able to dig into how you treat someone, the equation between how people are treated and then how they perform, which is really what that company was founded on. If we equip people to do their jobs, equip them with the equipment, physical equipment, the environment, the training, and the respect, they're going to turn around then and offer what we want them to offer to customers. So
Cynthia, quick question. So as the company grew, was there some type of leadership development program, employee development program that really took that thinking between Herb and Colleen and really, filtered it and distilled it into the rest of the organization, like as they were growing, or did it happen organically?
Yes. Well, organically to begin with, and then as we scaled the company, we realized, this needs to be formalized. And we always had a training department, but it turned into what we called the University for People, or the U for P. And leaders would be brought in, and we would go over the values and over, what our operational goals were and our people goals and how they meshed. They weren't counterproductive. They were supportive of one another. So yeah, it was definitely laid out for people. We actually had 3, and this was probably about, I was there from 1989 until mid-2010. And about, I'd say 10 or 15 years into my career, we came up with these 3 main things, pillars. They were called warrior spirit, which means you do whatever you need to get the job done. A servant's heart, which is self-explanatory, and a fun-loving spirit. Those are the 3 characteristics of an exceptional Southwest employee. And they were actually on our performance appraisal, which I think drove the lawyers mad in the beginning because it was so nebulous. It wasn't a number. It was just, you know it when you see it. But it was 25% of your performance appraisal. Did you hit the mark on those 3 things? And if you went now across the company, and leaders in particular were responsible, you could go out now to any Southwest station and ask them, what are the 3 things you're responsible for? And they'll recite them to you, and they'll give you an example in their station what it looks like.
Oh my gosh. Now, so in order to have that level of consistency, that was part of the training?
Yes, absolutely. And you had to be able to give an example. What does warrior spirit look like in the Omaha bag service department? You know, what does fun-loving spirit look like in Philly? I can tell you a quick story about after Hurricane Katrina, if you'd like. I had formed that internal customer care department, and we not only sent birthday cards and anniversary cards, but we handled any kind of disaster that came up, and we dealt with like employees who had, say, a terminally ill spouse or child. We would walk them through that in terms of finding resources for them, making sure they understood how their benefits paid and so on. So when Katrina hit, we drew down service, obviously, at New Orleans, and we had 200 and some odd employees there, and we drew down to only needing 30. Well, New Orleans was a little different than most of our stations because most people join an airline to be a vagabond. They want to travel. They're all over the place. They don't mind moving because they like that. New Orleans was a different story. These people were deeply rooted there. They were almost all locals. They were not the vagabonds. They did not want to leave. But my area was tasked with working with our ground ops department and other departments to find jobs for every single person who had been displaced. So I had a group that were mine in particular, and one of my guys, his last name was Thibodeau, and I found him a spot in Philly, and he kept calling me and saying, I don't want to go to Philadelphia. I don't like the cold weather. I'm from here. This is home. And I said, but Thibodeau, this is where you got to go. And, you know, our call sign, our stock symbol is LUV. And we talk a lot about love at Southwest Airlines, and people, when they were unhappy with the decision, they would always say, where's the love? And one day I was sitting there typing, doing something at my desk, and I felt somebody looking at me. I looked up, and it was Thibodeau standing at my door, and he goes, where's the love, Cynthia? He had flown in from New Orleans to Dallas to ask me that question. I said, the love is in Philly. Go get you some. And so I moved him to Philly, ordered him some winter uniforms, made sure he had what he needed. And that was in November by the time I got him settled. He called me in the spring and he said, this is my fun-loving spirit. I want to have a crawfish boil for these people up here who don't know anything about crawfish. So I called one of my old shippers from cargo and had a ton of crawfish and shrimp sent up there, and he set it up on the ramp and boiled shrimp and crawfish all day for those people. And they served cheesesteaks, and you know they showed him what a cheesesteak was. He showed them what a crawfish boil was. So it was just that was our role, was making sure people felt what was real, not making people feel a certain way, but letting them know we care about you. One of my guys that I had to move to Chicago, and I said, do your children have winter coats? And he said, no, ma'am. I said, have they ever seen snow? And he said, no, ma'am, but I imagine we're about to rectify that. So we made sure everybody had winter coats and that Santa Claus came for his children that year, because these people were wiped out. I mean, they were wiped out.
Yeah.
So it was
I remember
just
Katrina.
So it was just an example of how family comes around family. And that's how we saw it, was we're family and we're here for you. That doesn't mean that we can make a job appear where you want to live. You're going to have to go to Chicago or Philly, come back, you know, as jobs open, as we rebuild. But that was just one example of how we expressed that.
I remember me and you having a conversation outside of the webcast, and you were walking me through kind of the career model. So you had people in the HR department but they didn't have formal HR experience. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I didn't have formal HR experience. I was one of those. My degree is in clothing and textiles with a business minor, and they had me in there doing EEOC work. But they knew that I knew where to find answers, and I knew where the lawyers lived, and I had sense enough to know what I didn't know. So we had recruiters who had never recruited, but they had excellent communication skills. We had people doing stuff they had never done before, but we knew that they had the character and the brains to give it a go, and we knew we'd provide them resources as they came along. And it allowed you to identify talent that you would never necessarily have put in that role otherwise. If you had restricted yourself to must have had X number of years in HR. Well, why? I mean, if you got good sense and you know where the lawyers live, why not?
No, that absolutely makes sense. That absolutely makes sense. What, you know, throughout Southwest history, there were times where there were energy crises, there were recessions. How did that affect the business, if at all? Because,
it affected the business.
For years. Yeah, for years during these times, Southwest was still able to turn a profit, even though these macro things were happening outside of the company. How did that impact the company culture, or, you know, how did it impact the company?
So we never had a furlough. We never had a layoff. We never asked for wage reductions. And the reason that we were able to do that, I can't testify that this is the way it is now because things change. But at that point, we always operated, and this was straight out of Herb's mouth, you operate in good times as if you're in bad times. That way, when the bad times come, you have some money in the bank. And that's exactly what we did. And our RASM and CASM, which are revenue per available seat mile and cost per available seat mile, there was a certain proportion that we needed, and we hit it. We either hit it or we heard from him at our quarterly leadership briefing. And the one time I saw that man angry, was when he had addressed it in a previous meeting, came back to the next meeting, and he said, not only has it not gotten better, it's gotten worse. And he said, at some point, something bad's going to happen, and we're all going to wish that you had done what I asked you to do and cut costs, maintain, control costs. That was just a few months before 9/11. And when 9/11 hit, we were still positioned to handle it well. But exactly what he had been saying all those years came true. We didn't lay off one person, even though, you know, we had flights that were grounded for a while, and things were a lot different. Costs immediately went through the roof, but we were ready to handle it.
Wow. So now you are at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. What lessons, experiences are you able to take from Southwest and bring over into your new role?
So it's so many of them, but the main thing is people want to be seen. They want to know that you care about who they are and what they bring to the table. And if they believe that, they'll do anything for you. I mean, we would have followed Herb right off a mountainside, through the gates of hell, you name the analogy, because we knew him, we trusted him, and we knew that he cared about us. and it wasn't a figment of anyone's imagination. It was the truth. And that's what the leaders here, what I'm working with here, is to help people understand. I know you respect your team. I don't know if you're showing them that. I don't know if you're telling them that. If there's a blank, people will fill it, and it won't necessarily be with the right answer. So take every opportunity to praise people, to redirect them when you have to in a really respectful way. There's always a way to say something that doesn't crush somebody's spirit. One of the small things that I brought here, I'm building an internal customer care department here in a very nascent way, but just things as simple as a nurse had a baby, she gets a personal note from our CEO, well, now our EVP of the health system, that says, congratulations on the birth of your baby. And he'll call the baby by name, which matters to women who have had a baby. Congratulations on completing the triathlon. I had no idea you were an athlete. I actually went to college on a track scholarship. He'll tell them a little about himself. And people connect. They want to connect. That's who we are as humans. We want to connect. And we don't do any of this in a manipulative way. We do it to say, we see you, the whole you, not just the nurse at the bedside or the surgeon in the OR. We know you have a wife and kids, or we know that you're a car racing enthusiast, or whatever it is. We see you. And man, are we glad you're here. And people respond to that with discretionary effort and loyalty.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And in your current role, like, have you noticed, that type of effort? Have you noticed it in your metrics as far as engagement and things of that nature? You have? Yes.
We had an engagement survey shortly after we started some of these initiatives, and the university hospitals, which is the area that now I'm expanding into the clinics as well, but just the hospitals scored really well, up in most critical areas and among the best scores on campus. And I would like to attribute that to people just being conscious of saying, I see you, I appreciate you. Those micro recognitions, like in the hallway in front of their colleagues, you say, I saw what you did in surgery the other day. That was fabulous. It was quiet, seamless teamwork, and it made all the difference. Thank you. That, you see that person's shoulders go back and that chin go up, and they're part of a team then.
That's awesome. So in other industries, you have leaders experiencing a lot of, churn. We talked about this before the webcast kind of went live. What are your recommendations for leaders who are seeing a lot of churn in their organizations and certain critical roles? How should they think about talent mobility, maybe in a geographic area or even maybe the world, depending on their organization? What are your thoughts about that?
So, as I mentioned to you, I think there's some positive aspects to that. There are also some negative aspects to it. If you're really seeing a lot of churn, you're losing some institutional knowledge, which really helps create the shorthand that makes business move a lot faster because everybody's got the same context. So you lose that. On the other hand, you're getting fresh perspective. And with the, I hate to use the word millennial because it's such a broad brush, but with some of the younger generations, now that I'm the older generation, you see people who, they want to be more mobile.
Okay.
Oh yeah, right, you're a baby. But you see, people want to be mobile. They want to move. They don't necessarily feel a loyalty for 30 years at one place. But to the extent that you can hang on to good talent, you want to. And I would say this, if you're seeing a lot of churn out of a certain leader's area, you need to dig in and find out why. Because that may be generational, it may be market driven, or it may be that you've got a leader in there who manages up really well and treats their people like crap. Sorry, I said crap.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's a private webcast. It's totally fine. So my very last question to you is, when it comes to, impacting the workplace environment, what's the number one thing that you would recommend to leaders in general?
To understand what clear, respectful communication can do. I think that leaders a lot of times just assume that everybody has the same context they do. They understand background, that if they stopped and thought about it, they'd realize they're not in the meetings I'm in. They don't know what we're doing. So you have to be clear, and you have to be respectful and inclusive. And it takes, you have to be mindful of it. You have to be conscious of it. And not everybody is Herb Kelleher or Colleen Barrett, where it drives everything you do. So you have to learn it. And in the beginning, it feels clunky, and it might even feel artificial, but pretty soon it becomes integral to how you operate. And it is critical that your people feel included, respected, and seen.
Awesome. Well, Cynthia, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to have this conversation. We greatly appreciate it. For those of you who joined the call, thank you for taking time out of your schedule as well. So this concludes the webcast.